matter of the people of the state of California versus Orenthal James Simpson, case number BA096.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
And we are back live and doing great. Happy belated post-Thanksgiving. Taylor, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm really glad to be at my own house. And
Yeah.
I went to yoga this morning, and the people who like are the instructors are very kind of woo-woo and like that. And even they at the very end were like talking about minimalism, and they were like, and now my resolution after Thanksgiving is to minimize time with my family, but make sure that that time is quality time. And everybody was just started laughing and like cheering. And I was like, yeah, I get it.
That's hilarious. I love
So,
that. Um, Wait, let me introduce us.
yep.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Doomed to Fail. We're the podcast that brings you history's most notorious disasters and epic failures twice a week, every week, and it is the post-Thanksgiving week, which is why we're talking about it. And I had two Thanksgivings not even on the day of Thanksgiving. We got Chinese food on the actual Thanksgiving day, but it was
That's
really fun.
isn't that like a Jewish tradition on Christmas?
It is, and we called. We have like a like a hole in the wall takeout Chinese place.
Yeah.
And Juan called and he was like, "Are you open today?" And the woman goes, "We're open every day." And he was like, "Okay." It's really funny.
It's
And to be
funny.
fun.
I don't know if this is true or not, or maybe it has something to do with MSG, but I do think the hole in wall Chinese places, I generally like those more than like I went
I
to like
like
a
them too.
really nice one. There's a really nice one downtown Austin called Key or whatever. It's QI. And it's
Hmm.
just like super upscale and super like fancy. And for some reason I was like, it just doesn't feel right to not just like douse everything in soy sauce and just shovel a bunch of orange chicken in your mouth. Like it just feels too
I know.
dainty for that, you know?
It's a different outcome. Like, what do you want? Do you want to just like eat a bunch of greasy Chinese food? Then like do it. Or do you want to like have like a long drawn out meal with like dim sum? Those are two different things.
I mostly just want to like drown in soy sauce and like
Yeah,
not be able to see over my stomach while I'm watching TV on my back. That's basically it.
absolutely. And you're not like pretending you're in China. You're like, this is a American experience that I enjoy.
Yes. Yes. More love for Panda Express people.
Exactly.
Um, cool. So let's go ahead and dive in. I think you're going to be telling us your story first today.
I am. I am. Okay, this is like, I don't think it's going to be long, but I feel like I could talk about it for a very long time. So I am going to try my best. So last time we talked, I was in Washington State and
In Spokane.
in Spokane, and it rained the entire time. I think I told you that because it's like it rains there. And my husband always wants to like get out of the house and do stuff. So we found like a little walk. So it was like a walk. It wasn't like a hike. It was like a path. You'd go and see a waterfall and come back. And so we had umbrellas. We did it. We went down to downtown Spokane and it was actually quite cute. There were some cute little stores and stuff. The kids went on a really old not Ferris wheel. What's it called? The
Merry-go-round?
merry-go-round, yeah, and they loved it. So that was super fun. But when we were walking to the waterfall, we like asked some person, we're like, "Oh, is a waterfall up there?" And they were like, "Yeah, but it's not on right now." And we were like, "What? Okay." Which was funny, but also I should have known that because I was in the middle of reading a book for today's topic about a very, very famous waterfall.
Niagara.
Yes.
Sweet. You know what's funny is my parents just went to Niagara Falls and
Did
they
they?
yeah, and they were so blown away by it. Like,
Really?
I don't know. I've never seen it. I don't feel like I would ever would would I be that impressed by just like a really big waterfall?
I think so. And it's not the biggest waterfall even in the United States, really. But it's just like very popular. And I'll tell you all about the history of it and stuff. But I'm interested that your parents just went because I think toward the end I have what I think should happen, and I'd love to hear more from that when we get
Sweet.
there. Okay.
Let's do it.
So our friend Kiara actually suggested this, but she suggested the part of the story of people going over the falls. And I will have some of that in there, but then I was like, oh God, there's so much more in here about like the history of the area, of the geology, the whole thing. I read one book, and there are like 1,000 books about Niagara Falls, but I read one called Inventing Niagara by Ginger Strand. So that's where most of my stuff is coming from that book. So Niagara Falls on the American side, as we know it, are three separate falls. They were created about 10,000 years ago during the Wisconsin glaciation that created the Great Lakes. So like glaciers, border of Canada, United States kind of area, and they start moving things around and they create the Great Lakes. You know,
Yeah,
you know what I
of
mean.
course we all know that, Taylor.
You know what I mean. They've been changing a lot, and it's sort of like, well, duh, because due to erosion, a waterfall is going to change. That absolutely makes sense if you think about it. Um, I'm going to read a paragraph from Wikipedia right now to just kind of tell you some of the facts. So, Niagara Falls is a group of three waterfalls at the southern end of Niagara Gorge, spanning the border between the province of Ontario in Canada and the state of New York in the United States. The largest of the three is Horseshoe Falls, which straddles the international border of the two countries. It is also known as the Canadian Falls. The smaller American Falls and Bridal Veil Falls lie within the United States. Bridal Veil Falls is separated from Horseshoe Falls by Goat Island and from American Falls by Luna Island, with both islands situated in New York. So the like the little islands that like you can look at the falls from.
Did you say Bridal Veil?
Yes.
So I went to. Okay, well that must be a common name for when you started talking about waterfalls. The first thought I had was I did this trip around New Zealand and I went to Bridal Veil Falls in New Zealand. It's a, I guess, just a common name. It's not that
Yeah, I
hard.
mean, it looks like a veil. It's white,
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Yeah. Fair point.
you know. So those are the facts. Um, the people that lived there that we know before settlers came were the Seneca people. They're part of the Iroquois Nation. And they were the most west of the Iroquois speaking people, and they were called the keepers of the Western Door. So that Western Door is essentially at the top of the falls. There's like rivers and lakes that go out into the Great Lakes and then can like move you west. The Seneca have an oral tradition, like an oral story that references an eclipse that we know happened in the 1100s. So they'd been there at least from then, but probably for many hundreds of years before then. Um, Today, there are about 8,000 people in the Seneca Nation. They live and work in five reservations in New York, mostly on casinos around Niagara Falls. So there's a lot of like Niagara Falls casinos and that kind of thing up there. If you go to Niagara Falls, like your parents did, they will probably see a myth about like a beautiful Native American girl going over the falls in a canoe. And it's for a couple reasons. Either she like can't marry the man she loves, so she sacrifices herself, or they want to sacrifice her for like rain or whatever, or there's a snake chasing her. There's a lot of like a big myth about like a young woman going over the falls. That's not true. It's like something that was made up by like settlers and stuff, especially because there were no human sacrifices in the Seneca Nation. Like that was not a thing that they did. But it's like a story that they're going to tell a bunch. And Strand in the book that I read suggests that it's a myth created by the Seneca or part of these myths are like we're being chased by this snake, and the snake is essentially the Europeans coming to, ruin our way of life, which they did.
Yeah, but they got casinos out of it, Taylor. I would much rather have a casino than my ancestral homeland. You know how much fucking money I'd make?
How awful. I'm
I'm
sure it's
joking, by the way.
terrible.
I'm
No, we know.
joking, just in case
We know.
anybody. Okay.
I mean, I know. I mean, yeah, we know. So because that's about to happen, everything's about to be destroyed by settlers. The French come first, and I know we've talked about this. I'm going to mention like a ton of people that we know in this story. But we know how the French come over and they want to be fur trappers. That's what they
Uh,
love to do.
Sorry. Yes, I'm aware of that. Are these Seneca or Niagara Falls, and we didn't start the fire?
No,
Okay,
unfortunately.
continue.
Good question. So the French came over to be, of course, preachers and fur trappers. One of the most famous people who came first was a man named René Robert Cavi Cavier. I'm sorry again. He is the Sieur de la Salle, which means Lord of the Manor. He should have a whole episode. He was like a French aristocrat, somehow came from France, was evolved. involved in exploring the Great Lakes, Ohio, and Texas. So like a huge parts of the United States, and which is like a big trip even now with like
Yeah, what,
airplanes.
what was he like 12 when he started and he died
You
at
know?
150?
Yeah. He actually did end up getting killed by the indigenous tribes, the Karankawa in Texas. So eventually they got him, but
Shout
he
out
was
Texas.
involved in a lot of that. Um, Imagine, so now it's 1677-ish. There's a lot of Europeans coming. The Western Door, like I said, is the access to the rivers and the lakes beyond the falls, which is a huge deal. People want access to that. Um, William Bradford, who we talked about a very long time ago in Plymouth, called the area around Niagara Falls a place full of savages, and even Cotton Mather had an opinion about them. So people that we know, we're talking about them. Eventually, there's a battle on September 14th, 1763. It's called the Battle of Devil's Hole, where it's like right after Pontiac's Rebellion, and like also there's wars between, obviously like the Revolutionary War is about to start, so it's a lot's going on. The Seneca lured the British soldiers into an area and killed 81 British soldiers. And even though the Seneca won that battle, the it caused Britain to bring over a lot more people, and then they were able to push the Seneca out of the area because of that, and they pushed them more north. So
Sorry, what
sort
year
of
was
like
that again?
that was in 1763.
So wait, okay, wow. So the Revolutionary War was like right around the corner.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I do think I want to learn more about Pontiac's Rebellion. Like, I feel like there's a lot. I mean, there's so many stories, obviously, of like individual tribes like fighting for to keep their land and being pushed north to Canada or being pushed west, and then just being pushed further and further west forever.
Yeah, I mean, you did an episode on, I can't
Yeah,
remember the name of that.
the Trail of Tears with
No,
Andrew
you did
Jackson.
the man, the native group in Canada.
Oh yeah, yes, yes, exactly. The people who became the Creoles. I can't remember.
I can't remember either.
What is going on? I know we've done so much, but yes, exactly. So that's exactly they're being pushed into different places. Um, So this kind of is going to go not in chronological order because there's a whole bunch of things happening. Um, as time goes by, there's the United States side and the Canadian side of the falls, like we just talked about. The United States side is like, by all accounts, pretty shitty. Like there's casinos, there's crappy hotels, there's like a shitty museums, like a Madame Tussauds, that kind of thing.
You're talking about right
Um,
now.
yeah,
Okay.
and which makes sense if you've like ever been to upstate New York. It's beautiful, but it's so like tortured. Like there's like these beautiful old towns that were like industrial towns and now they're abandoned. You know, like it sucks because upstate New York is so pretty, but it's pretty run down
Yeah, it's like, I
in
mean,
general.
you remember Olympia National Forest and Grays Harbor? Like they're
Hmm.
beautiful, but like also just broken down meth towns.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So a lot of places in upstate New York are just like that. And people do start even after, so right after like the Revolutionary War, people are going to start traveling to Niagara Falls just to see it. One of the first recorded people to honeymoon there is actually Aaron Burr's daughter, Theodosia. So she went there, and also, guess who else went there on and brought his bride on like a honeymoon? You're never gonna guess.
Yeah.
We heard about he was. I'm just gonna tell you. Jerome Bonaparte from who the Grimm brothers worked for.
The one where
You-
I said that his last name was Jerome Napoleon, and you're like, no, it was
Yes,
Bonaparte. Got it.
exactly. Exactly. So he'd been to Niagara Falls and he knew the Grimm brothers. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, history's nuts.
Nuts. Okay. So that's just kind of like a little bit about like the vibe. People start going there as tourists like pretty early because it is pretty, like you said. Pre-Civil War, there is a lot going on. Canada outlawed slavery in like the early 1800s. And lest you think that I think Canada is perfect, there was still indentured servitude and racism, and it was terrible. It wasn't like good in Canada, but it wasn't the United States. And a lot of people were taken from the United States to Canada via the Underground Railroad via Niagara Falls. And if it's good enough for Harriet Tubman, it's good enough for me because Harriet Tubman was there. She 1855, they built the Niagara Falls suspension bridge. It's no longer there, but it was a two-level bridge. The top was for trains, the bottom was for like carriages and walking, and it became like a really, really important part of the Underground Railroad. Harriet Tubman herself would oversee the crossings. She would go on the trains with people, and they'd be like hidden in containers, and she would say, "Look out! You can see the falls," and people would be like, "I can't!" Like they're just so nervous because they're trying to get to Canada. Um, the Fugitive Slave Act complicated things because that was an act where you could, or people were hired to catch enslaved people who were trying to escape north to either the north of the United States or to Canada and bring them back to their enslavers. But it was still a very popular route for the Underground Railroad. Um, two tangents about that because this is so much. There
Real,
is a
real quick,
family.
sorry,
Yeah.
wasn't slavery still outlawed in the northern states? Like, wouldn't you just have to go to the northern states? You didn't actually have to go to Canada, did you?
Well, because of the Fugitive Slave Act, you had to leave because
Oh, because somebody could go to Massachusetts, find you, and then take you back. Got it.
yes. Yeah. So people were trying to leave to leave to Canada. Um, so two things that are kind of related to that. There's a family called the Porters who is credited for helping the area become more protected and more popular. Really, they were just looking to make money and like for ways to get tourists there. So they weren't like conservationists. And one of the patriarch of that family is named Peter Porter, and he was someone who would help um, enslavers catch their enslaved people and bring them back. So he's not a good guy, but sometimes he's put forth as being like the father of Niagara Falls, and like that's not necessarily true. Um, if you go to Niagara Falls, so next time your parents go, I would suggest going to the Niagara Falls Underground Railroad Heritage Center because that sounds very cool. It's a museum, has a bunch of
Yep.
stuff.
I'm gonna ask something, but like, it's gonna sound really stupid. But like,
Mhm.
is the Falls of Niagara Falls has that always been there, or was it a dam that made it do the fall thing?
It's always been there since 10,000 years ago when the
But where does
glaciers
the
separated
water
it.
keep coming from? I don't know how this works.
I don't know where the water comes from.
How could it
Like
have
where
that much water always going downhill?
I have no idea how waterfalls work. That is a
S-
very good question.
Maybe there's like a pump at the bottom that just pushes it back, like kind of like a water fountain.
I don't think so. I think that waterfalls are just like ongoing water that like, comes from like the rivers. But like where do rivers come from? Rivers are always flowing,
Does
you
anybody
know? So it's
know
just like,
this? If anybody knows this, can you write to us at
oh my God, I feel so stupid.
com?
So it's just like the end of a river, you know, and it goes over a waterfall. But rivers are always moving. They're not like static. They don't like run out of water.
I have no idea how it works.
Well, there's a couple more things I'll tell you on that note, and we can talk through it. Um, So anyway, Niagara Falls, big part of the Underground Railroad, which is very cool. Also, from 1901 to 1908, other things were happening in the United States, so we skipped ahead a bunch, but Jim Crow laws, voter suppression, people are starting to get like really angry, obviously, and 32 African American leaders meet on the Canadian side of Niagara Falls because they weren't allowed to be in the hotels on the US side of Niagara Falls, and they start an organization called the Niagara Movement. The Niagara movement didn't last too long, but a lot of the founders of the Niagara movement moved over and founded the NAACP. So the Niagara movement is often called the predecessor of the NAACP. So a lot of stuff happened there. Just happened to meet there.
Who would have known?
Yeah. So another thing that happens during all of these times is people are trying to do stunts over the falls because of course they are. They're trying to like get tourists and have people watch something and get people to come. Strand, the author of the book that I read, she was like, "Oh, the stunts are kind of dumb, but I like them. I want to see someone go for it in a barrel. You're not allowed to, but like I'd watch,
Yeah, of course. We
you
all
know."
tuned into Evil Knievel
Exactly.
trying to kill
Like,
himself when we were kids.
yeah, like I would totally watch that. Um, and one of the first things people do is tightrope walking. And man, I hate tightrope walking. It makes me want to die. Like, did you watch like
Yeah.
Man on Wire?
Yeah, I didn't watch that, but I did remember the guy who walked across the Grand Canyon or tried to walk across the Grand Canyon. It was like, I mean, even
It
if you
makes me want to throw up.
fail, I know I can't do it. I can't do it. I
Ugh.
can't do heights.
No, it's crazy. But the most famous tightrope walker is named Jean-Francois Blondin Graveling. His stage name is Blondin. He crossed 8 times in 1859. He crossed like over the falls on a tightrope. One time he did it carrying his manager on his back, like as like a
I hope
stunt.
he died, the richest man in the world.
He did not, but he and so it's 1859 when he's doing this, and he's crossing from the United States to Canada on a tightrope. And something that Strand, the author of Inventing Niagara, said that it's sort of like her hypotheses, which makes a lot of sense, is like there's no way that people didn't associate that with escaping the United States into Canada because it was like actively part of the Underground Railroad. People are actively trying to escape their enslavers in the United States and move to and like get to Canada. And someone is doing this like dangerous trick, doing the same thing. So she's like, there's no way that people watched this and didn't think about what was happening in the United States. And she equates it to like, what if David Copperfield went down to the Mexico border and like disappeared himself to the other side of the wall? You'd be like, that's amazing. And also like, that's political, which I kind of agree with.
I
Like,
guess.
there's no way you didn't like it feels like it could have been a little bit political, or at least people might have like
I don't know. You actually
thought
have a
about
real
it.
world example of it because David Copperfield literally did that between the Mongol side and the Chinese side of the Great Wall of China.
Did he
Or
really?
yeah,
Cool.
yeah, and like I don't know. I didn't think about the geopolitical aspect of
Did the people that live there think about it?
maybe that,
Like maybe like maybe a percentage of folks thought about it.
maybe that.
But I think it's interesting. There were other tightrope walkers who tried as well. There was a guy named William Hunt who called himself the Great Farini, and him and Blondine would kind of go back and forth. Like one of them cooked an omelet somehow on the tightrope, which doesn't make any sense to me. In the 1870s, a woman named Maria Spelterini, she was 23 years old, and she was the first and only woman to do it on a tightrope. And she did it a couple times. One time she was blindfolded. One time her ankles and wrists were handcuffed. Like,
Yeah, I don't
I
get
don't
it.
even understand. Um, so it stopped being popular kind of after that because it was so dangerous. But in 2012, a man who has quite the resume, his name is Nick Walenda, and he is like his great grandpa started the Flying Walendas, which is like a group of performers. So he comes from like a family of circus performers. He's still alive. He has like the Guinness Book World Records for like longest time on a bike on a tightrope, things like that. But with permission of both governments, he crossed in 2012, but he had to bring his passport because he couldn't get into Canada without it, which is funny.
That's pretty cute. I like
Yeah.
that story.
There's also people that go over the falls, sometimes by accident. And I know that there are 3 falls, but I'm not doing that right now. I'm just calling it all one. I'm talking about people going over them. In something, oh, so first it happened by accident a lot. I'm sure plenty of people lost their lives accidentally going over the falls. In the first recorded one is from 1853, where 3 dudes in a boat lost control and went over, but I'm sure it happened before then. Animals actually went over a lot just naturally, like fish and geese and maybe like a deer would like fall in and go over. So there's reports of like both the Senecas um and Europeans like finding freshly dead animals at the bottom of it and being like, sweet, that was easy.
Yeah,
And just
cook it
eating
up,
it.
grill it.
Yeah. Something that is insane and that you're going to hate. In 1827, they filled a boat called the Michigan with animals and sent it over the falls to see what would happen.
I
And they
fucking hate
charged
that.
they charged 50 cents per person to watch it happen. They had like a bear and dogs and deer and all sorts of like they were gonna try to get like a tiger and an elephant, but they couldn't get them. But they had some animals go over. One bear was like dizzy at the bottom. I think another one they never found, and a lot of the animals they didn't find. But people paid to see it.
God, just fill it with people and throw it over. Like, why you got to do with the animals? They had nothing to do with anything. They didn't do any of
I
this.
know, I know,
They
I
were
knew
here
you'd.
before all of us.
I know, I knew you'd hate that. I mean, I didn't do it. But so
You
there was
would have
that.
paid though. I know you would have.
I might have, but like then, sure. Now, no. But like then, yes. The tailor of the early 1900s would have paid to go. The tailor of
Okay.
right now knows better and would not go.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Um, In 1901, a woman named Annie Edison Taylor, a 63-year-old who pretended to be in her 40s, was the first person to go over in a barrel. She sent her cat over the day before, and the cat survived, so she was like, good enough for me. And she went over, she brought a heart-shaped pillow in her big barrel. She was like a school teacher who didn't have a lot of money and was trying to just like do anything to make money. So she thought that she could like do some speaking after this, like be on the news, and she was, but she ended up, not making a ton of money from it.
What
Um,
year?
that was in 1901.
Okay, so that was 20, 200, or sorry, 120 years ago.
Mhm.
Somebody put their cat in a barrel, threw it over Niagara Falls. The cat came out unscathed. They're like, all right, I'm just gonna do it myself. And now we're sitting here talking across 1,700 miles to each other.
Hmm.
And what are we gonna be like in 200 years? Like,
No, we're not. No, we're not going to
how
be
are we
here.
the same
Yeah,
species we were back then?
absolutely not. It's insane. Yeah, 100%. I don't know.
Crazy.
Um, so people were kind of pissed that the first person to do it was just like a regular lady. They wanted it to be like a more big of fanfare, but it was her. And she said she died 20 years later, still poor, but she at least had done it. She said, quote, "If it was with my dying breath, I would caution anyone against attempting the feat. I would sooner walk up to the mouth of a cannon, knowing that it was going to blow me to pieces and make another trip over the fall." Because I'm sure it
So
was awful.
how far is the top to the bottom again?
God, such a good question. I have no idea. Let me look it up. How tall? It is 188 feet high. I guess not like super high, but very wild. Wait,
That's
no. No, it says,
crazy high.
I mean, I thought it would be like
To free fall 180 feet?
yes, and you're like being battered with the water. It's not like a nice.
That's crazy. I can't believe you'd even survive the fall, much less the drowning.
Well, a lot of people didn't. And so there's a whole list on Wikipedia of people who went over the falls. And I pulled out some highlights. In 1903, a drunk professional baseball player was kicked off of a train and he fell into the water and he died. In 1911, a man named Bobby Leach went over in a metal barrel, which feels like more harder. And he spent 6 months in the hospital afterwards, but he survived. In 1960, a 7-year-old boy fell off a boat, and it was like he was with his like family friends, and him and the adult family friend went over the falls. The boy was wearing a life jacket and he survived, but the family friend did not. Um, in 1961, a man went over in a big bouncy ball and he survived. Like he had like a big rubber ball that he went over in. In 1981, a woman dropped her baby over the falls and was charged with murder, but it was dismissed. And to be clear, you're not allowed to do this. Like, you're not allowed to go over the falls in a barrel. If you do it, you're like doing it at night, evading the police. Um, in 2003, a man named Kirk Jones went over after drinking with friends. He said it was an attempt to die by suicide, but he survived. And in 2017, he did it again and died. Like he wanted to die
So,
that way.
okay, again, to our listeners, write to us, doomsdayfallpod@gmail.com. What I'm blown away by is I think the human body reaches terminal velocity at like 30 feet of free fall,
Hmm.
and almost nobody can survive that. Is there something different because like
Maybe,
there's
I mean, I
water
feel like
around you,
and possibly the barrel's like absorbing part of that energy.
but then
I
you're
don't know, I'm a
smashing into the
scientist.
barrel? Like that
No,
sounds
I know.
even
That's why
worse.
he was in the hospital for 6 months because he like broke all of his bones.
The Golden Gate Bridge is 220 feet, and everybody who jumps off that thing died. I have no
I
idea how
know.
is it even possible. Okay, anyways,
I know, you're right. Like a lot of people die like this. In 2011, an exchange student from Japan like walked over a barrier and sat on a rock to like watch the falls, and then as she was leaving, she slipped and fell and died. And then just a month ago, on October 28th, 2004, 33-year-old woman named Chianti Means climbed over the guard with her two children, ages 9 and 5 months, and their bodies have still not been recovered. Florence is here. She just said, "Whoa."
that's you gotta stop exposing her to this stuff.
She walked in. Um, but that so people are going to continue to try to go over it. The next person as a stunt is gonna have to like sneak in, but there's a lot of guards trying to stop you from doing it because it's obviously, like you said, very, very dangerous.
Yeah, it sounds like you legitimately have to have a death wish. Also, you have
Yeah.
to have a death wish and the desire to die in the one of the most terrifying ways possible. Like that woman, the first one, the school teacher that did it, she had it right. Imagine in complete darkness inside of like a wine
Yes.
barrel,
Oh my God.
and you hear everything going on. Like
No,
this,
it's gotta be so loud too. Yeah.
it's gotta be so
Absolutely.
loud. I get terrified when I go to like a nice resort and they have one of those like grottos and the water's pouring over it. Like that freaks me out. Going putting my hand underneath that thing.
No, totally.
I get scared real
And
easily though.
I know exactly what you're talking about, how loud that is when you go over under the like tiny little waterfall at like a
Yes.
resort. Yes.
Yes.
No, it's and then like that's the thing too, like it's so loud. The whole time. It's so loud.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so that's people who've gone over it. So what else has happened there? Obviously people are trying to make it profitable. They want people to come and visit. They own the land, they want tourism, all the things. There's lots of decisions and conversations about how do we conserve it and how do we make it profitable. One person who we brought up before, Frederick Law Olmsted, who designed Central Park, he was there, and in the 1870s, he helped build like promenades and places to walk. And he also like blew up some of the islands and like moved things around. Because like remember, Central Park, those aren't real hills. Like they made the hills. They
Right.
made the lakes. You know, like they made it look like it was before, but like it's not what it naturally was like. You know, it feels natural, but it wasn't. So that's what he did. He did there as well. In 1885, Governor of New York, David B. Hill, made Niagara Falls the first state park in New York State. So it's like semi-protected by the government. Um, Other things we've mentioned that like honeymoons are really popular there. In the 1920s, it became a big deal to have like a one-on-one honeymoon. Before that, the honeymoon was a time where you would like with your family go around and visit family that weren't able to make it to the wedding ceremony. So it was like,
That was the
just
point.
like yeah, it was like an extended wedding. But now it became like kind of sexy to like have your own one-on-one honeymoon. And it was very popular to get to Niagara Falls because it was easy to get there for most Americans. You could drive there and it was nice. You could take a train there. In 1892, Oscar Wilde visited Niagara Falls, who we know, and he said, quote, Niagara will survive any criticism of mine. I must say this, however, that it is the first disappointment in the married life of many Americans who spend their honeymoon there, which is a joke, but he saw it too. There's a movie with Marilyn Monroe called Niagara where she's on her honeymoon with her husband, and there's a scene where she like walks away, and it's like 30 seconds of her walking away, like doing her little civil walk. That made it also very popular. Um, there are also a lot of like junk museums, like I said, like a Ripley's Believe It or Not,
That's not
or
a junk museum. What are you
yes, it
talking
is.
about?
It's not like a real museum.
Where else are you gonna be able to stand next to like the guy who's like the tallest man who's ever lived? Like you can't do that anywhere.
I think junk museum is the right word. Not like not in a bad way, but in like a, it's a junk museum. I
Right.
also, though, actually, that reminded me, I was at the airport the other day, and one of the screens of the airport bar had a thing that was just like Guinness Book of World Records over and over again. So it was like a dude on like standing on a bouncy ball juggling for 2 minutes, and like just like those ridiculous ones, like the person who blew a playing card the furthest across a street, things
Do
like
you
that.
know
I think that was.
what Guinness won't take as a world record anymore?
We just talked about it. Holding your breath. What was it?
Sleep.
Sleep. Oh yes, you're totally right. Um, So, but also, this is cool. So, there was a museum called the Niagara Falls Museum. It was in Canada, in Ontario. It was founded by a man named Thomas Barnett in 1827. So, he like was friends with people who were like, I don't know, grave robbers is kind of the word, like people who were like bringing antiques from the Middle East, from Europe, from these native settlements, like and just like selling it to the highest bidder. Um, it closed in 1998, so it was open for like a really long time. And when it closed, the entire collection got sold to this one dude. And that dude was like going through it piece by piece and selling it. And you know what they found? They found a real Egyptian mummy, the mummy of Ramses the First, and they returned it to Egypt in 2003. So went on like a little bit of a tour, went back to Egypt. Ramses the First died in 1290 BC, and his mummy ended up in Niagara Falls.
That's kind of nuts. Do
Isn't that
we know
crazy?
how it ended up there?
It was like just like someone like stole it from the tomb and then it just like was in like a bunch of private collections, just like stolen like brought around the world.
Wild.
Wild, right? Um, so that's fun. So then there's other things that are happening, and this is where we'll talk about like the waterfall itself. So yes, they're doing preservation and thinking about that, but the other question is how much power can it generate? You know, which is a good question.
Probably a ton, given that we get a lot of water from water.
Yeah, energy from water.
Yes.
So the they sent a call out to be like, how can we do this? How can we do this energy? So Edison tried and he failed, but guess who succeeded and who has a huge statue in Niagara Falls right now?
Tesla.
Tesla. You're right. You're right, Tesla. I knew you know that. And also enter Robert Moses. So they built the hydroelectric plant via like the what is it? The double current thing that Tesla invented.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's going. And they want to make it bigger. So enter Robert Moses, of course. Um, and in the book, Strand was like, "Yeah, if you're in New York City and you're mad at Robert Moses, like try coming to Niagara Falls." 'Cause, like he did like worse things there. He bulldozed some of the paths that Olmsted had created to create parking lots so you could charge for parking, because that's just like the kind of guy that Robert Moses was.
Sorry,
Um,
Robert Moses was the power broker, right?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I took a picture of me reading the Power Broker because I was excited because I got to pull it out again for this episode. I put it on our Instagram. Um, but some things that he did is like there were some Seneca nations that were still there and they still owned their own land, and he bought them from them at like a really low price, and it was like such a bad deal that even Eleanor Roosevelt wrote him a letter and was like, "Cut the shit, like, don't do this." You know, like they were, and they did things that they were like, "Oh, let's preserve this part of before we build these like actually gigantic plants. Let's preserve parts of." The area and the way that the parts that were preserved, like very conveniently, were not the parts they needed for the plant. So it was all like a cover up and like people working together,
Right.
you know. So, um, obviously electricity became very popular very fast. We've talked about this, like thank God for electricity. There
Thank
was
God.
at a World's Fair, they had like a whole thing that was like better living through electricity. And the answer is yes. So much better now that we have electricity. And so essentially, every time you go to Niagara Falls, you are not seeing the falls at 100% of what they could be. You are seeing it anywhere between 50 to 70%, and we can control it via the hydroelectric plants. I have no idea how technically it works, but that's how you can technically turn it on and off. So there, during the peak tourist season, they turn it up to 70%. But at night, they bring it back down to be able to use that water for electricity. So during the summer, the water is reduced to 50,000 cubic feet per second at night to use that for the electricity. But that's still bringing it down to 50%. It would be twice that at its normal level, but it's never at 100%. It's either at 70 during the tourist season during the day or at 50% during the rest of the year.
So I have a really, really hard time with large volumes or quantities of things. I can't even understand what that means, you
Okay,
know?
let's see. Yeah, and me too. I totally agree with that. Cubic feet. I'm saying 50,000 cubic feet. What does it even mean? Like, what does that mean? Does that mean? Good. People ask. I don't know. We'll have to think about. I have to look that up better because I really don't know what that could possibly be. I guess how many cubic feet of water in a pool in an Olympic pool?
Okay. So
Okay, so Olympic.
37 shipping containers stacked together is 50,000 cubic feet.
Okay, and that's per second that go over it. So Olympic pool is 88,000 cubic feet. So a little less than Olympic sized pool go over the falls every second.
Right.
Is that helpful?
It does. Yeah,
I
yeah,
also
yeah.
feel overwhelmed. It's a lot. It's too much. Um,
It's the volume in like three average three-bedroom size homes. Like if you were to fill the interior of for a three-bedroom home full of
uh-huh.
water three times, that's how much water it is,
Wow.
which is terrifying to think about.
It's terrifying, terrifying, terrifying. So of course, people are like, well, if we let it go at 100%, it would erode faster. And you're like, yeah, because nature also, like, it's supposed to change. Like, that's part of the point, you know?
Right.
But right now we control a lot of it, which is crazy. Um, so other things on the American side that I just wanted to note, there was a thing to have like a really beautiful planned community there for people who like worked around the area because there's tourism, but there's also a lot of industrial things that were happening around there, obviously like with the water plant and things like that. And they built a community called Echota, which was like Echota, which is all these like houses and like beautifully lined streets and like trying to be like a perfect suburban place. And the houses were designed by Stanford White, who we know was murdered on top of Madison Square Garden.
Oh yeah.
But most of them now have been knocked down or they're like it did not work out. I tried to find one on Zillow and I couldn't find exactly a Stanford White House, but like there are a lot of really pretty houses for very inexpensive up there in that area on Zillow now. Um, Another thing that I'll kind of end with that happened later and in more recent history is there was, like I said, there was a lot of industrialization and actually a lot of pre-work for the atomic bomb was done in the Niagara Falls area. So they would like get the uranium and like other things and bring it there, but they wouldn't tell people what they were working on, obviously. So before it got to Los Alamos, a lot of it would be worked on in Niagara Falls, but you'd only work on like a little part of it, you know? And you'd be
Why
like,
are homes here so cheap?
because wait, just wait a second.
Okay,
Hold
sorry.
on. Because okay, so they're building piece by piece of the atomic bomb, and with that comes radiation, and they're not taking precautions. They're not telling people what it is. People aren't wearing hazmat suits, and they're dumping shit into all of the rivers and into the land, and a lot of stuff is going to be built on landfills that are filled of like bad things. So
I think you just
the
answered my question in
Yeah.
that.
hmm So, like, a lot of people who worked on these things have died of cancer. You know, a lot of people who were just like drank the water in the area when they were children are dying of cancer. There's a place called the Love Canal, which is now,
Oh yeah. That's a fun story.
yeah. So essentially, it's a 16 acre landfill in New York. And from 1942 to 1953, they just filled it with hazardous waste. Over 21,000 tons of chemicals, acids, chlorides, pesticides were dumped there. Jimmy Carter declared it a disaster zone in 1978, and they've been like trying to clean it up since then.
I
So that's
think it
like a
was
lot of reason.
yeah, I think it was the first Superfund
Oh, yeah.
site in the US. Yeah.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Yeah, because it was like very bad, and the people were like, the people were irreparably harmed, you know, from it. Um, so now to kind of end is that there are historical societies and preservation societies. We've only really been there for a few hundred years, you know, like figuring out what to do with it, you know, building and destroying and changing and doing all these things. So I feel like, and I'd like to hear more, because speaking of the cheap houses, I kind of think that people should move there now. Like, I think the answer to places like those small shitty towns in the middle of America where like it used to be great because of industrialization and now it's not. And there's people like a lot of drugs and a lot of things. And like there's, you know, plenty of examples where that doesn't happen, but plenty where it does, where like people can have online jobs and live there, you know, and like help the community. I feel like there's a chance for that to happen. Because it is
So
beautiful and the houses are cute and they're cheap. Like, why not make a little cute little tech town up there?
so
Besides
I'm
the snow.
sure somebody has like done a lot of research on this and studied this, but like Detroit. So when we were growing up, remember like the original RoboCop and that horrible, god awful city that was visualized as like the town in Detroit in RoboCop that was supposed to be
hmm
Detroit, and it turned into a complete shithole
hmm
after manufacturing got sent overseas essentially. And now it's like kind of back. Like it's kind of like a cool
hmm
hip spot. Like and like if you look at property there, yeah, sure you'll find like $20,000 houses, but you'll also find like really cool looking lofts. Like it's kind of like a hip
Yeah.
tech spot, and like whatever they did to facilitate that, yeah, just do that with all these little burnt out towns that
I think
should
it'd
come
be
back.
cool. I think there's just a lot of opportunity in those places. Have you watched Detroiters? Have I
No.
told you about it yet? Oh my God, it's so freaking funny. It's on Netflix. It's two seasons. it's like just these two dudes who live in Detroit and they're hilarious. And there's one episode where there's like a tech company that moves into their building and they're like kind of mad at them. And the tech people are like, oh, we're gonna go walk to this area. And they're like, no, 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 you'll get shot, which reminded me of when I moved
Oh yeah,
to
that's
LA and
all of our experiences.
I tried to walk somewhere and Kyle at work was like, no, absolutely not, and like drove me there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Um, so like I mean, there's and then there's like community things that need to happen. Like there need to be, you know, drug rehab centers and things like that to like help the people who live there like move up. But I feel like there's, opportunity everywhere, but there's so many of these like especially in America, these small American towns that um need a little pick me up. And Niagara Falls is one of them. And it's by one of the tell me what your parents thought. They thought it was beautiful.
Yeah, they thought it was incredible. They thought it was like they were like it feels so powerful, and people were getting on boats and like going near it, and I was like they were
Hmm.
like terrified to do that because they thought it was just like foolish to like try that.
Hmm.
But they were just like really in awe of it in a way that like I usually don't feel when I look at natural things, but I think it's because
Hmm.
I've consumed so much media about it that I kind of have a sense of what it must be like.
Hmm.
I don't know. When I saw the Grand Canyon, I wasn't like, "Oh my God, this is
Well,
amazing."
I think that like when I look out my window, I can see like several mountain ranges. I like live on a mountain, I can see a bunch of stuff, and it's hard because it's so far away and so huge, like the Grand Canyon. Like when you're looking at it, like I can't perceive how big the thing I'm looking at is. Like you take a picture of it, it doesn't work, like all those things. But I feel like Niagara Falls is small enough to be able to see all the grandeur in one spot.
Soak it in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But I've never
yeah,
been there. But that's what I imagine like is the difference because when you're looking at the Grand Canyon, you're like, I have no idea what I'm looking at. This is huge, you know?
yeah, yeah. I've thought like the hiking tours that like REI does into the Grand
Hmm.
Canyon that could be kind of fun if you survive it.
I just
But
feel like I just don't want to camp. So like I'll do like a day on a donkey. Maybe. I mean, I might hate that because I hate being on a horse. But I feel like maybe a donkey and I could hang out
you could,
because we'd be
you
like,
get
let's
along
stop
with the
and have a
donkey.
snack. Yeah.
You could get along with the donkey. Can you hear the
That's it.
barking?
I cannot. No.
Okay. So
Um,
that's fun. Thanks for
yeah.
sharing that, Taylor.
I learned a ton, and it's fun. It's fun how many crossovers we have with other stories that we have.
I know. I'm gonna kind of talk about that in my story this
Ooh,
week. But yeah, it all history kind of flows into itself quite a bit.
it does, and we're
Um,
learning.
well, thanks for sharing, Taylor. Is there anything you
Yeah.
want to read out or listener mail or?
I did get a note from Morgan on a way to say medieval to help you be able to spell it correctly. I'm gonna open up her voice note and play it for myself and then tell you what she said. Um, because what'd she say? Can you hear this?
No.
Medieval kind of helps you, if you say it like that, you can kind of spell it better, but I feel like I got the evil part right.
Eval.
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 Medieval. Yeah.
Eval.
Medieval. Yeah, I think maybe that's it.
Yeah, it might be the way to do it.
Anyway, so thank you, Morgan, for helping us do that. And she also said that she got her mouthwash out with soap.
Seriously, that's still
Yeah,
going on.
like for real. So she said, so she's like, it's still, I mean, not recently, but like, we know when she was a child. That
Hey, Taylor,
happened.
have like, I mean, you're a parent. Is like rearing kids like a lot different now than we were kids with like the shit that we did, like the punishments you would get,
Yeah, I mean, I definitely got spanked and I would never spank my children, you know?
or like what about like just being out and about and like playing around and
I mean, like by yourself as a kid.
well, we used to just like run around the neighborhood
Yeah,
and like play around and like that was at the height of like our parents being indoctrinated with like people
kidnappings,
kidnapping
stranger
kids and my parents
danger.
like go for it. It's
I
fine.
know. I let my kids out a lot. Like one time there was like we were at soccer and like across like a soccer field like pretty far there's a concession stand and Florence was like, "Can I go to the concession stand?" And I was like, "Sure." And I gave her my credit card and I was just like, "Just go." And she just went. And then another friend of hers asked their mom and their mom was like, "No, I have to go with you." And I was like, "Oops."
All right,
Like
so there's
I
variations of
yeah, I was
child
like, "Oh, I
rearing.
just sent my child there with my credit card." She's 10 and like
But
hopefully they let her use it, you know? So yeah, it depends.
but washing mouth out with soap is not on the.
No,
Okay,
no.
that's probably a good one to let go.
Yeah, it's a good one to let go. I do like they have like a running list of how much money they have. So they have like 20 bucks on the fridge, you know, and it goes up and down because I'm like, if I find your shoes in any place with the shoe rack, that's minus $1, you know. So we do stuff like that. And like
That's a good way to
they
do it.
they like money, so you know.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice way to. Yeah, I mean, yeah, bribing
Um,
kids works.
it totally does. I'm sure that's always been the case too, you know.
Right. Right.
Um, and then also one more announcement is I'm starting a new podcast by myself.
What?
Um, not the first. I do want to do this one about first ladies, but I also have been thinking about my town, Joshua Tree, where I live, and there's so much that I don't know about it. There's so many historical things and like things that are going on locally. Like, what do you do when you have kids? Like, where are my kids taking music lessons? What's Little League like? I just went on a brand new hike 2 days ago. I'd never been on, and I lived here for 5 years. I know the director of development at the national park. All these things that I want to talk more about. So it's called the Joshua Tree Bee, like a little newspaper, and I'm going to start it soon. I'm on Instagram at the Joshua Tree Bee.
So are we having so Doom to Fail is going to become like the parent company,
Yes.
whatever it is, and then we're just going to have like separate podcasts underneath. So
Yep.
if you're a listener and you want to host a podcast and want to, get the know-how on how to get that going and want us to publish it for you, get in touch.
No, start a network.
Yeah, I like that.
Doomed network. I love that for us.
That's fun. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Very
Cool.
cool idea. Okay,
Thank you.
we'll go ahead and cut things off again. Find us on the socials at DoomNFLPod, on Gmail at doomnflpod@gmail.com, and we'll join you all again in a few days. Thanks,
Cool.
Taylor.
Thanks, Forrest.